If you're anything like me, you probably live in a state of low-grade perpetual anxiety.
Oh, the to-do list anxiety.
The to-do list anxiety. It's that feeling that there's always too much to do, the goals are endless, and somehow, no matter how hard you run, time is always running out.
Right.
And every productivity book I've ever read, it seems to promise a system that'll fix this, but they usually just end up making the pressure worse.
They do, because those systems are trying to address a structural problem with, like, tactical solutions.
Exactly.
We are limited beings, but we live in a culture that sells us on infinite possibilities. And we try to use apps and routines to, optimize our way out of that fundamental reality.
And that's just exhausting. So today we are taking a radical shortcut right past all the optimizing and the apps. We are diving into a powerful essay by Oliver Burkeman, a piece of work focused entirely on the relief you find in understanding your limits.
The original German title translates to something like, unfortunately, not immortal.
I love that.
Yeah. This is a deep dive into what the sources call finite living, or the psychology of finitude. And the central, almost shocking promise here is that accepting our limits, accepting that we are mortal, actually makes life profoundly lighter.
That's our mission today. To understand why facing our own finitude offers genuine, lasting relief instead of, immediate despair or panic.
And this guide builds heavily on the philosophy Berkman developed in his book, 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals.
Right, which was a huge international success.
It was. And what makes this material so compelling is its breadth. It doesn't just offer self-help tips. It synthesizes these really profound insights. We're looking at ideas from philosophy, religion, literature, psychology.
It bundles it.
It bundles it all into what is essentially a surprising and entertaining crash course for an age defined by turbulence and just chronic overwhelm.
Okay, let's unpack this. The core tension we have to confront is it's accepting two truths. One, life is extremely short.
And two, that failure is absolutely inevitable.
So if you're a listener who feels that standard productivity approaches have just made you more anxious about not measuring up, this discussion is specifically for you. It really offers a framework for sanity. Let's start with the math, because it's the foundation of everything in the source material. It's simple, but it's brutal.
It is.
The average human life, if you're lucky enough to live to 80, spans only about 4,000 weeks.
4,000, that's it.
That's all the time you get.
And that number isn't meant to send you into a panic so you frantically try to do more. It's meant to instill a sense of realism.
A realism that forces you to acknowledge that the vast majority of things you could do, you just won't.
You simply won't. There isn't time.
But wait, if I truly absorbed the terrifying brevity of only 4,000 weeks, doesn't that initial reaction lead to panic? I'm thinking, I have to cram in more experiences, more achievements.
Right. And he argues that that desire to cram more in is exactly the addiction we need to cure. The central concept we have to grasp is letting go of this deeply ingrained idea that life is a problem to be solved.
Or a project to be perfectly optimized.
Yes. That is a huge mental roadblock for the modern person. When you approach life as a project, every single moment is scrutinized for efficiency.
Your relationships become networking. Your hobbies become marketable skills.
Exactly. And the core lie we are sold is that we can do everything. That with the right routine, the right habits, you can somehow squeeze this boundless list of achievements into a very, very tiny container of time.
We have to abandon that belief.
We must.
Yeah.
The sources suggest we need to redesign our lives with the reality of our limitation, our finitude, as the foundational premise.
I think we can all relate to the pressure of that. Maybe you're trying to work a high-stress job, raise kids, take a night class, and maybe launch a side hustle. The insight here is that this mentality, even though it claims to be about efficiency, it just leads to this soul-crushing, paralyzing stress because it's based on a false premise.
It's based on the idea that more time exists than actually does. And philosophically, this concept of finitude, which thinkers like Heidegger explored, it's that facing that ultimate deadline of death doesn't create terror. It creates authenticity.
Okay, how so?
Well, when you accept the boundary, you gain the clarity you need to decide what genuinely deserves the limited time you have left.
So the 4,000 weeks aren't a countdown to failure.
No, they're a boundary condition that gives your choices meaning.
So if that whole optimization mindset is broken, it's because it relies so heavily on the illusion of control.
Precisely. And this brings us directly to the stress that comes from our obsession with control. We try so hard to control time in the future through, obsessive, detailed planning.
But the sources are clear. perfect planning does not eliminate unpredictability.
Never. It only creates this rigid structure that just breaks the second reality intervenes.
We all know this feeling. You schedule your week down to the minute, planning to be perfectly productive.
And then a global crisis happens, or your laptop crashes,
Right.
or your kid gets sick.
Or you just wake up with a crushing mental fog and can't focus.
Right. You're trying to eliminate the gap between how you want things to be and how they actually are.
Yeah.
But that gap is called life. The attempt to totally dominate and control time is a stressful, losing battle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. That idea about control leads us straight to a fascinating paradox. The material highlights. The very attempt to fully dominate the flow of time. That itself becomes the primary root of stress. It's like an Ouroboros of anxiety.
The sources put this perfectly. The more you try to control time, the more time ends up controlling you.
Wow.
If your calendar and your routine dictate your emotional state, then you are a slave to them. You spend hours optimizing your schedule, and you feel free because you're managing your anxiety, but really you've just prioritized the process over actual living.
But isn't some level of planning necessary? I mean, are we saying we shouldn't use a calendar or plan for the future at all?
No, not at all. Planning is responsible. But expecting certainty from that plan, that's delusional.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is that this isn't about tips and tools. It's about questioning the fundamental assumption that we should be able to predict and control everything.
That's the assumption that all standard time management advice is built on.
It is. And it sets you up for failure the moment a single variable shifts.
So we need to create some critical distance from that anxiety, instead of just automatically accepting that we have to manage every minute.
We should ask why we're trying to manage every minute in the first place.
And it's often a pursuit driven by the anxiety of a missed opportunity.
So if we accept that we can't do everything and we can't control everything, we shift the focus. We move away from productivity and toward a positive skill, the art of forfeiture.
The power of choosing what to consciously miss out on. And this is where we bring in the joy of missing out, JOMO, which is so hard because we're so conditioned by FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Of course.
Choosing not to do something feels like a failure.
But the crucial skill here is consciously deciding what to postpone or even what to just definitively abandon. We have to learn that saying no to 99% of possibilities is what allows us to say a profound and satisfying yes to the 1% that actually matters.
So it requires a complete reorientation of prioritization. Instead of asking, what should I cram into my schedule first?
You have to ask, what am I genuinely okay with failing at today or this week or this year?
Because if you maintain that constant panic desire to do everything,
to be the perfect employee, parent, partner, friend, everything,
right,
the ultimate result is that you will end up doing nothing properly. Your energy is spread so thin that nothing gets any genuine depth or satisfaction. By consciously forfeiting some things, you give power and depth to what you do choose.
The sources blend that heavy philosophical insight with some really practical advice. I found two suggestions particularly resonant. The first is deciding in advance what you will fail at.
That's such a powerful tactic because it preempts the guilt. You're not failing by accident. You're failing intentionally.
And in service of a higher priority.
Exactly. Like, if you know you want to launch a business, you might consciously decide to fail at keeping a perfectly clean house for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
You're accepting imperfection in one area to achieve focus in another.
So that changes the whole narrative from I'm a slob to I am strategically focused.
It does. And the second piece of advice is limiting yourself to only one large, significant project at a time. This is a forced, intentional contraction of your attention.
Which is so radical today. Every guru pushes side hustles and multitasking.
This is a genuine break from that modern mandate. It's about stopping the belief that we should always be juggling 5 things, learning 3 new skills, and optimizing our investments all at the same time.
And that is the joy of JOMO.
It suggests that embracing these limitations is what actually creates meaning. That constant, exhausting belief that you are always missing out on the better option is crippling. When you fully commit to one thing, you're present, you're focused, and you're immune to the fear of missing out.
Okay, let's move to the final core ideas. This is where the work gets a bit abstract, moving into the truly existential.
But it's also where it offers the greatest psychological relief.
Right. So this segment takes direct aim at perfectionism and that common procrastination trap. The I'll start properly someday illusion.
We all tell ourselves that. I'll start writing the novel when I have a clear month, or I'll start exercising when I have the perfect routine and all the right gear.
That illusion feels safe, though. If I wait for the perfect moment, I can guarantee success, right?
Well, you're protecting your ego from inevitable failure. You wait for that perfect frictionless time because you secretly believe that if you try now, imperfectly, and fail,
Yeah.
that failure is permanent proof that you are fundamentally incapable.
Hmm.
The material really emphasizes that taking small, imperfect action now is the most genuine human way to live. You have to accept mistakes and regrets as just an indispensable part of life.
So we have to accept the humanness of it all, the messiness, the uncertainty.
The guarantee that whatever we do will be flawed in some way.
Absolutely. And this leads us to the grand finale of relief, what's called cosmic insignificance therapy.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
This concept, which the sources highlight, argues that accepting that our lives mean almost nothing on a cosmic or universal scale can be profoundly liberating.
Wait, hold on. Insignificance is liberating. That seems completely counterintuitive to everything we're taught about self-esteem and making an impact.
It is, but think about the crushing pressure you put on yourself. We feel like every email, every career move, every decision has to be monumental and perfectly chosen and world-changing.
That pressure comes from thinking that we as individuals have to be the sole authors of some grand historical change.
Exactly. And that burden is exhausting. I feel that pressure just thinking about it.
Me too. So accepting cosmic insignificance provides this immense relief. Your little failure today, your less than perfect project, the universe doesn't care. Your boss might care, your client might care, but the universe is completely unconcerned.
It's a radical shift away from this narcissistic modern tendency to believe we have to be the main character in the entire human story.
That's a massive weight off the shoulders.
Yeah.
If our lives are ultimately insignificant on a universal scale, the relief is that we could then pivot and focus intensely on the few things that matter here and now. The source material emphasizes focusing on those few things that are meaningful to me right here in this moment, rather than chasing some legacy defined by external expectations. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the enduring strength of Berkman's approach is how he so deftly combines deep intellectual traditions.
From classical philosophy on mortality to modern psychology on anxiety.
Right, into the surprising and accessible crash course. He makes these heavy topics like death and finitude and failure readable and engaging, but without ever trivializing them.
And this is particularly relevant if you're the kind of listener who is struggling with chronic productivity anxiety. If reading self-help books has always made you feel inadequate because you couldn't keep up, this material offers you permission, a kind of allowance to actively choose to do less.
This raises an important question, though, and we have to include the specific warning from the source. Do not approach this work expecting traditional, immediate, implementable tips or tools or apps.
So it's not about optimizing your calendar or finding a new routine.
No, it's not about magically generating 2 extra hours a day.
It sounds like it's less about installing a new operating system for time management and more about, uninstalling a whole worldview that says you have to be an optimized machine.
Precisely. The goal is to fundamentally change that underlying desire to achieve everything, which is a much deeper and ultimately much more calming endeavor than just shuffling your schedule. It's about accepting reality instead of fighting it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? If you spent your life fearing that your time is short and that you're constantly running out, Berkman suggests that the very brevity of life can offer a new perspective.
I have a new perspective that makes you feel dramatically lighter.
It's permission to stop rushing and start being fully present with the things you have chosen to keep.
It's the permission to finally, authentically be human, limitations and all.
Now, consider those 4,000 weeks. Take a moment to think about your current to-do list, or maybe the mental spreadsheet of expectations you carry every day. What is the one task, goal, side project, or expectation you are currently holding on to? The one you know deep down you'll never get to, or that doesn't actually bring you meaning, that you could consciously decide to fail at today in order to focus truly on what matters most to you in the limited time you have.